Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning and welcome to Facing South Florida. Later in the show, we will talk to Alex Pinellas, who is running for mayor of Miami-Dade County. But first, as Governor Ron DeSantis continues to give conflicting and confusing messages about whether or not schools will reopen next month, the state's largest teachers union sued the governor to block an executive order threatening schools that don't open their brick and mortar classrooms. Now, I was supposed to interview the state's education secretary this week, Richard Corcoran, but he canceled on me at the last minute. So instead, I spoke to Fedrick Ingram, the president of the statewide teachers union, about their lawsuit. I started by asking why the lawsuit was necessary.
In the Florida Constitution, it says that our government is responsible for a safe and secure, among other things, public education system. And we don't believe that our government, given the epicenter of this pandemic, given the virus running rampant and out of control in the state of Florida, they can ensure a safe environment for our students and for those special teachers that work with our children and any employee that's working in our public schools right now. So we filed suit because we believe that the emergency order that was issued a week before is unconstitutional, which forces schools to go back into a brick and mortar option throughout the state.
In listening to the governor over the past 2 weeks, it seems as if he was pushing to have students go back into the classroom. He seems to have walked that back and talking about how he's always been in favor of parental choice. It's a cute way of him sort of getting the issue of vouchers and the rest of it sort of into his dialogue. But his argument is now, as I understand it, that if a parent is uncomfortable sending their child into brick and mortar schools, then the parent should be able to stay home. In his address to the state, he even suggested that if teachers and staff are uncomfortable because they have pre-existing conditions or their concerns, they don't have to go into the brick and mortar classrooms. Have you basically won, in other words?
Well, no, we haven't won yet. But it is ironic that a lawsuit has forced the governor's hand to do the right things in our state. But here's where we are. We still have the emergency order. And so our superintendents, our school boards are still guided by that emergency order as it relates to the Department of Education. So our lawsuit seeks to throw out the emergency order, allow full control from our local governments, from our superintendents, our school boards, our local unions, so that they can operate in a manner that they see fit, not given and the penalties that are involved in the emergency order. Because if you don't have a brick and mortar option, there are penalties if the Department of Education does not approve your plan. And so we still need that emergency order rescinded so that the governor's words will match actions that we need in our public schools.
You use the word plan, and I think that's the appropriate word here. To your knowledge, does the state have a plan? Is the state providing guidance as to how to safely reopen? Have they provided the funding? Have they provided, suggestions as to how to socially distance with children? Have they provided those sort of resources which you would expect that the state should provide to local school districts and local schools?
Sure. Well, let me ramp this up to our national government, and then we'll scale back down to our local government, because our governor has tied himself politically to the President of the United States, which is tied to his appointee, the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. We have gotten a lack of leadership from Betsy DeVos in terms of a national plan to reopen schools. We got a slogan from our president that says schools must open in the fall. Well, we know we don't need a slogan. We need a plan. We need a strategic thought process and comprehensive evaluation of what's going on. And we need to have the funding and resources, like you said. We know that the House has passed the HEROES Act, and we're asking that the Senate take it up this week or next week to add those additional funds. We're going to need more money going into the future than we've had in the past. And so we all know that if we're going to adhere to social distancing, if we're going to deal with masks, proper protective equipment that our students may need or our teachers may need. And so we've gotten a lack of guidance from our governor and from our commissioner of education. They know that it's going to cost more money. They know that it takes a strategic plan and we should be coordinating together, and they haven't been amenable to do so.
Obviously, they've hit on several facts which I think are actually true, which is that there has to be a real concern that students are going to lag behind, that while distance learning is possible. It's not ideal that there are a number of students, particularly in lower income households, who don't have access to Wi-Fi, don't have access to computers, that the gap between what students need to learn and what they are learning is growing ever wider. So is that not a legitimate concern to try to push this issue, to try to get kids back, especially if, as the governor claims, children are at a much lower risk of contracting the virus and a lower risk of spreading the virus as well?
So I know firsthand, growing up in Liberty City and Brownsville and Overtown, now residing in Tallahassee, I know what it's like not to have, or not to have enough of. Either that's clothes, or either that's food, or the digital divide that we have right now. This is life or death we're talking about. We're talking about keeping students alive. We're talking about keeping children alive. And one life lost to this pandemic that we could have saved because of something that we could have done as a government or as leaders in our public education is one life too many. And so we cannot let partisan politics or the threat of academic regression be the fear of keeping a child alive. There are too many unanswered questions. And so yes, there is going to be some academic regression, but here's what I know. Our teachers are the best in the business. Our teachers will do what it takes to get those kids where they need to be if we're given the proper conditions, if we're given the proper funding, and if we're given the proper plan around us. We can get those kids wherever they need to be. They always do it. Our teachers do not fail. And so what we're asking for is this system not to fail our teachers and not to fail our educational support professionals.
Well, let me paint another scenario for you, which I think is based in somewhat in reality. For a lot of parents, particularly those who do not have the ability, like I do, to work from home, a lot of those essential workers that we've come to rely on, that we've now come to recognize, who are trying to make a living every single day to keep, rent, to keep food on their tables. Those folks have to go to work. And school provides a very real place for them to be able to shelter their children while they are at work. The notion that they can just not send their kids to school, or that they can just stay at home, isn't realistic. Isn't it more likely that what you're going to start seeing is kids being crammed into neighbors and friends' homes where there won't be social distancing? Aren't we potentially going to see some of the same outcomes you're afraid of if we don't have the controlled environment of a school?
Sure, and you bring up a great point. Listen, there's no silver bullet, there's no panacea to what we're in right now. We're going to all have to hold each other's hands and go through this together. But here's what I do know, that if you usher these kids in, the same kids who will have the issues on the outside of school will have the issues on the inside of school. Those are the same kids who cannot shelter in place. Those are the same kids who will not be able to isolate if they're stricken with the virus. Those are the same kids who have food deserts already, who don't have digital platforms at home. And so we need to take care of these kids. We have to keep these kids alive. This virus is killing people every single day. In the state of Florida, we know it better than anybody else in the world right now. What we need to do is get our hands around this virus. And shame on the governor and the commissioner of education who know that the issue is the virus and not our public schools. Our public schools are a microcosm of what happens out in society. And what's happening with society is we've allowed our society to be reckless in bars, to be reckless in beaches, to be reckless in restaurants, going to restaurants that are 25% capacity and 50% capacity. And now we want to usher hundreds or thousands of kids in schools and we can't check all the boxes. Well, listen, I know that we can lead better than that.
How scared are your members? How scared are your teachers?
I've never seen anything quite like what I'm hearing today. We have people who are filling out wills, living wills. We have people who are dealing with early retirements, people who said, I can't go or won't go. We have people who are healthy, but they're taking care of an elderly parent. We have healthy teachers that are taking care of sick kids at home, and they don't want to pass this virus off to someone else, or run into an asymptomatic situation to where they are unwilling participants in this connectivity that we have with this virus. This virus is real. This is something that we did not ask for. This is something that we all find ourselves into, and the only way that we can get out of this is together. We have to hold each other's hands. We have to think sensibly. We have to push in dollars to our school systems, and we have to put kids first. And then right next to those kids, we have to put teachers and bus drivers and cafeteria workers and security monitors and secretaries, because it's an educational village that's going to make this right. Our state government must do better for our public schools.
We will try to reschedule our interview with the state's education secretary for next week. Up next, Miami-Dade mayoral candidate Alex Pinellas.